Hello, good evening, everyone. You're very, very welcome here on our Tuesday evening broadcast. Thank you for joining with us. I don't know what it's like where you are, but it's a blowy evening. It's just a night to be in at the fire, and so we just to put up your feet and keep in a warm, comfortable place for the next sort of half hour, 45 minutes. And if you can share the live link, that would be great. And if you have questions or comments, just let us know in the Facebook live chat or on the YouTube chat. So we're going to be continuing our discussion on what will the new RSE curriculum look like, and but before we get to that, I'm going to ask Mark for any kind of news relation to the campaign, anything past week. I understand Jim Allister of the TUV published on his Facebook page there a letter that from the Department of Education. So, Mark, you might want to talk a bit about that and where people can find.
Yeah, so Jim Allister has been writing a series of letters to the Department of Education, probing about the new curriculum and also probing about things that are clearly missing from the consultation, like an opt-out option for teaching staff. Now, he received a response this week from the permanent secretary at the Department of Education, who confirmed what I think we already knew, that the Department of Education are under absolutely no legal obligation whatsoever to provide any kind of an opt-out for school staff. So that wasn't overly news to us. It was confirmation of what we had expected the stance of the department would be. But one of the other things that we found during the course of the week was that unions have now entered into discussions with the Department of Education around what an opt-out for teaching staff may look like. And that is without a doubt, in a large part down to the pressure that's being exerted on them by the letter that we've got running. We currently have well over 350 signatures on our staff letter. Staff from across primary school, post-primary, teaching staff, the support staff, classroom assistants, all signing the letter, all getting on board and saying, no, we will not be involved in teaching, preparing, or supporting this curriculum. So we would encourage you, if you know any teachers, any support staff, ask them to sign the letter. We need to keep getting signatures on there. We've got a meeting ourselves with the Department of Education coming up at the start of next month. We need a strong mandate to go to them and demand an opt-out, not just for teachers, because it is simply not enough we get an opt-out for teachers. We also need to have an opt-out for staff who will be subjected to these lessons or be forced to prepare materials for these lessons as well. So confirmation, as I said, the department are not legally obliged to do it, to give an opt-out, but they are in negotiations. However, those negotiations and the opt-out they're talking about do not go far enough, because they offer no protection at all to any other school staff other than teachers. So that's a big news from during the course of this week. Wesley, have you anything else to report?
Yeah, there's obviously quite a lot of developments that are happening that we are working on, and there's quite a number of meetings planned with key people over the next number of weeks and months. You may be interested. We have had quite a lot of requests for public meetings, and we will not be able to facilitate all of them over the next 3 months. Some of them will have to wait into next year, but there are 3 that are scheduled at the, and that is going to be 8th of September, 7:30 in Annalong, South Down, Mullerton House. That's on our Facebook page. If you need any further information about that venue, let us know and we'll send that to you. But if you're in South Down, or if Bridge or any of that, we would encourage you to get along to that meeting in Mullerton House at 7:30. We have some very key political people, also representatives that have committed to be there. We're looking forward to hearing from them as well. Mullerton House on Thursday the 28th. We also have got Belfast on Tuesday the 10th, and then in Lisburn Congregational Church on the 19th of October. I believe that's a Thursday. So we'll keep you updated with that as we get further information. But we've had a number of other requests, and we're working to see if we can facilitate dates for that. And then we also have another special visit from an overseas visitor who will be helping us on this issue, but we'll outline those details to you next week. So over to you, Mark, to talk about the curriculum. Thanks.
No problem. Thank you, Wesley. Yeah, and really looking forward to the visitor that we've got coming over over the course of the next couple of months, because it's going to be an incredibly important one in terms of going forward and how we combat this in our schools. So what we're going to do tonight is take another deep dive into the curriculum and what the curriculum may look like over the course of the next few months. If you missed last week's episode, really encourage you to go back and watch it. It contains a lot of detail on things like the legislation and how we got here, what the Northern Ireland curriculum is supposed to look like, how it's developed, and how the current RSE provision works. Now, what we're going to do this week is we're not going to dive into as much detail on that basic stuff, but we're going to go straight into what the curriculum may be shaped like. And this is a really important conversation that we need to have at the minute, because there are people in Northern Ireland who are campaigning against RSE, but are unsure and not aware of what the curriculum may look like. And it's true for all of us. Nobody is totally sure what will come January, and we have extremes of opinion. On one end of this extreme, we've got a very extreme curriculum being posed. At the other end of the scale, we've got what I call RSE Light, and organizations who are promoting the idea that the changes to the RSE curriculum will simply be around abortion and contraception. So last week we looked specifically at one of the claims of those who are pushing this idea of RSE Light, and that was that schools will still be able to teach this stuff in line with their conscience and their ethos, and that schools will be able to tailor any requirements upon them to match the ethos that currently exists in the school. And we showed very clearly that that is one of the key things that was criticised by CEDAW, by the Secretary of State, and we don't believe that it will be able to be tailored. We believe that it will be a very prescribed curriculum. So we'd encourage you to go back, watch that. But tonight we're going to spend a little bit of time having a look at content. And again, all of our information is available on our website, niagainstRSE.com. There are also a number of actions there that you can take that will allow you to take a stand against what is currently happening with the Secretary of State. But as a quick reminder, let's just remind ourselves of how we got here, because this is really important. So in 2018, a CEDAW committee who were invited to Northern Ireland by a bunch of pro-abortion activists published a report that recommended wide-ranging changes to the laws in Northern Ireland with regards to abortion, but also a range of recommendations that sought to change the moral fabric of Northern Ireland. Now, that report could have just been put on a shelf and ignored forever. And in fact, anytime these committees make recommendations to the UK government, they do just get ignored, and they've never ever become UK law. And the UK government are under absolutely no obligation whatsoever to implement them. But in 2019, Section 9 of the Northern Ireland Executive Formation Act placed a legal duty on the Secretary of State to implement the recommendations of CEDAW. So that is the abortion-related recommendations, but also the recommendations to change the moral fabric of our country. And across 2020, 2021, and 2022, secretaries of state have laid abortion regulations and given themselves increasing powers to do things that will allow them to change the law in Northern Ireland to implement the regulations of CEDAW. In 2022, the Secretary of State, Brandon Lewis, gave himself the power to appoint himself as Education Minister, as Health Minister, as First Minister, any position in the executive, in order to do anything that those people would do in order to pass through, to force through these regulations and any law changes that need to be made. And then, of course, we've ended up here in 2023 with the RSE regulations. So this all flows primarily from a CEDAW report that should have and could have been ignored into Section 9, a piece of primary legislation. And it is that primary legislation that gives the Secretary of State all of the power and control over this issue, over the abortion issue, and over a couple of other issues as well. So tonight we're going to be dealing with the second claim of those who are pushing the idea of RSE Light. And the claim is that the changes to the curriculum only relate to abortion and contraception. And if we look at the evidence that supports this claim, those pushing this claim will point to the regulations themselves. They'll point to how the changes or how the regulations change the minimum content that's to be taught in school. And they'll also point to the fact that abortion and contraception are the only topics that are actually mentioned in the regulations or in the changes to the minimum content. So let's have a look at the regulations and what they do. The regulations change the minimum content that is to be taught in schools to say, receive age-appropriate, comprehensive and scientifically accurate education on sexual and reproductive health and rights, prevention of early pregnancy, and access to abortion. And if you check the minimum content, you can see here that every piece that was included in the RSE curriculum already is still there. The only thing that's new is the piece at the bottom that says F2 beside it, and that has been inserted by the current RSE curriculum, RSE regulations. Now, the thinking of these groups who are pushing RSE Light is, well, our schools have been teaching all 6 of those initial points, and they've been able to tailor the curriculum to match what way they want to teach it. They've been able to, within those areas, pick and choose what areas they want, and they've been able to deliver it in whatever way they want to deliver it. Now, from their perspective, they're saying, well, that piece that's been inserted, all it does is introduce the idea of having to teach about prevention of early pregnancy and access to abortion, but schools will still be allowed to do that in whatever way they want and with whatever resources they want. So we really want to look at that tonight. Now, one of the other changes is to the education order. This is coming down to an issue of semantics. And, you know, I've read all of this legislation down to commas. And what you may notice, probably not at first reading, that there's a slight change in the wording when it comes to how the regulations that have been passed at the minute change the Education Northern Ireland order. And if you look at the piece that comes after Key Stages 3 and 4, it looks identical to what has been inserted into the minimum content. But there's one slight change. There's a comma in this section that doesn't appear in the minimum content. And the comma very much changes the emphasis of what is happening here, because it talks about scientifically accurate education on sexual and reproductive health and rights, comma, so a pause, covering prevention of early access to abortion. So that's the evidence to suggest that this will only be about early pregnancy, preventing early pregnancy and accessing abortion. That's the kind of viewpoint that a number of groups are taking. But we want to tonight try and challenge that and see if there's any evidence against it that would say, well, actually, it's going to be much more than what you're saying there. And the first thing is the CEDAW report. Then we're going to take a bit of a look at the explanatory memorandum that goes along with the legislation. We'll be taking a look at some of the statements by the Secretary of State, the current consultation, and then finally we'll have a look at the progression framework. So remember, the CEDAW report and the CEDAW recommendations are the only opinion that matters here, because the Secretary of State is not allowed to take the CEDAW report and interpret it in whatever way he wants and implement that. He has to implement it in the way that CEDAW have meant for it to be implemented. And in fact, his regulations change a little bit of what CEDAW require, because if you look at the CEDAW recommendation, it says make age-appropriate, comprehensive and scientifically accurate education on sexual and reproductive health and rights a compulsory component of curriculum for adolescents, covering prevention of pregnancy and access to abortion. So, of course, by inserting it into the legislation, he's cut out the section that says a compulsory component of curriculum for adolescents. And in doing that, he's changed again the emphasis of what CEDAW are requiring here. Because if you could simply look after that section and look at the covering prevention of early pregnancy and access to abortion, yes, it may look like these changes are just going to be about that. But before that comma is a whole other section that you need to understand. So what is the idea of sexual and reproductive health and rights, and what does that actually mean? Because CEDAW require comprehensive education on sexual and reproductive health and rights as part of our curriculum. Probably one of the best places to have a look at for a definition is the Guttmacher Lancet Commission from 2018. The Guttmacher Institute are a pro-abortion organization and lobby group in the United States, huge organization who push abortion across the United States. And the Lancet are a journal in which medical research is published. And you may have heard of the Lancet Journal and read some articles from it. In 2018, they launched a report on sexual and reproductive health and rights. And one of the core aims of that was to create a common definition of what sexual and reproductive health and rights was and is, and let that definition be used globally. And this is what they came up with as part of their research. They said that sexual and reproductive health is a state of physical, emotional, mental, and social well-being in relation to all aspects of sexuality and reproduction, not merely the absence of disease, dysfunction, or infirmity. Therefore, a positive approach to sexuality and reproduction should recognize the part played by pleasurable sexual relationships, trust, and communication in promoting self-esteem and overall well-being. All individuals have a right to make decisions governing their bodies and to access services that support that right. And they then go on to talk a little bit further and say that achieving sexual and reproductive health relies on realizing sexual and reproductive rights, which are based on the human rights of all individuals too. So this is the really key part. Have their bodily integrity, privacy, and personal autonomy respected. Freely define their own sexuality, including sexual orientation and gender identity and expression. Decide whether and when to be sexually active. Choose their sexual partners. have safe and pleasurable sexual experiences, decide whether, when, and whom to marry, decide whether, when, and by what means to have a child or children and how many to have access over their lifetimes to information, resources, services, and support necessary to achieve all of the above, free from discrimination, coercion, exploitation, and violence. So it's very clear that when CEDAW talk in their recommendations about accurate education on sexual and reproductive health and rights and making that a compulsory component of the curriculum for our adolescents, they are talking about much, much more than abortion and prevention of early pregnancy. Think about it this way. If CEDAW only wanted the curriculum to be updated to include abortion and contraception, why wouldn't they just explicitly say that? So, for example, they could have recommended make age appropriate, comprehensive, and scientifically accurate education on prevention of early pregnancy and access to abortion a compulsory component of curriculum for adolescents. But that is not what they have demanded. They are demanding that the curriculum be much, much worse than RSE Lite. What other evidence is there to suggest that this may be worse than RSE Lite? Well, if we look at Chris Heaton Harris, he spoke at a Pink News event on the 28th of June. And he said, and this is word for word what he said in it, in 2019, as Ben said, I was proud to support the extension of same-sex marriage to Northern Ireland, bringing it in line with the rest of the UK. That was an incredible moment for LGBT plus rights here and a testament to all those who devoted themselves to the campaign for marriage equality. More recently, earlier this month, I laid regulations which amend the curriculum in Northern Ireland for adolescents to make age-appropriate, comprehensive, and scientifically accurate education on sexual and reproductive health and rights a compulsory component of the curriculum. These were debated in committee on Monday and were actually voted on today while I was meeting the Rainbow Project and others. The motion passed through the Commons 373 votes in favour, just 28 against. This government believes that sexual and reproductive health education is an important component in ensuring adolescents are well informed of the choices available to them in Northern Ireland. But of course, there is still more to do. So notice in that paragraph where Chris Heaton Harris is talking about the education that he is forcing on us, he doesn't mention abortion at all. He talks about sexual and reproductive health and rights and making it compulsory in the curriculum. And of course, the big question that has to be asked here, why would Chris Heaton Harris boast about changes to an RSE curriculum at an LGBT event if the changes were only going to be about abortion and contraception? Because people who are LGBT are not the people who need to get an abortion, nor do they need to prevent early pregnancy. It doesn't make sense that he would do that if this was only about abortion and contraception. So what else is there? Well, if we look at the explanatory memorandum, one of the things that is a bit confusing is the wording. But the explanatory memorandum that goes along with the regulations kind of talk people through what is happening. And in the guidance section, it says the regulations place a duty on the department to issue guidance on the content and delivery of relationships and sexuality education in grant-aided schools by the 1st of January 2024. The guidance must be issued with a view to ensuring that pupils receive education on sexual and reproductive health and rights, including prevention of early pregnancy and access to abortion. So the word covering has been substituted here for the word including. So this is the guidance of what they're trying to achieve with the regulations is not just to introduce the idea of abortion and contraception. It is to introduce the whole gambit of what sexual and reproductive health and rights, and that will include contraception and it will include abortion, but that is not all that they're doing. More evidence of what they're trying to achieve can be seen in the consultation that's currently out. And in Section B, the parental opt out from lessons section, there was something that just jumped out of the page at me when I read it for the first time as a teacher. And if you're not a teacher and you were reading it, you may have missed this. But it talks in the preamble for Section B about how the curriculum in Northern Ireland currently works. It says the Education Minimum Content Order provides statements of statutory minimum entitlement, which all pupils must legally receive. In relation to RSE, it's the responsibility of the Board of Governors of each school to ensure that a comprehensive and age-appropriate programme is taught and that the standardised minimum content is covered. The curriculum is designed to help our children and young people gain the knowledge, skills, and attributes needed for life in the 21st century. So all of that is totally accurate. In the education order, there is a minimum content that must be delivered. And I showed you that minimum content earlier on, and it's very much able to be tailored to the school's individual ethos. So schools can leave out any aspects that they don't want to teach. Now, what surprised me is that when we get into the next part of this preamble, it says topics should include, but are not limited to, consent, violence against women and girls, domestic abuse, healthy and respectful sexual relationships, marriage, LGBTQ plus issues, abstinence, menstrual health and well-being, and social media and online safety. And when I was reading through this for the first time, something that struck me is that this is not the minimum content. So they were talking about minimum content that must be taught in schools. And then they say topics should include but are not limited to. And they give this list, which is nothing like what the minimum content actually is. So on the left-hand side of the screen, I've got what they were saying in the consultation. On the right-hand side of the screen, I've got the minimum content, including the guidance that is given by the Department of Education. And what you'll notice is very little of what is on the left-hand side actually appears on the right-hand side. So they must be getting this from somewhere else. And if you have a look on the SIA website, back in May, the SIA, who are our curriculum and examinations body in Northern Ireland, launched an RSE hub. Now, currently, the RSE hub is non-statutory. Schools can choose to use whatever resources they want, but importantly, they can ignore the resources that don't fit with their ethos. Now, in the website, it gives a list of topics that they say the different themes of these of their framework cover these main priority areas of RSE. And if you have a look at the list that they've got, you'll see that there is a lot more matches up from the left-hand side to the list on the SIA RSE hub that their progression framework deals with than actually matches up to the current minimum requirements. So for me, as a teacher, as somebody who's read a lot on this, it looks to me like the Department of Education are potentially hinting through their consultation that SIA's progression framework will be the new RSE curriculum whenever it comes to January of 2024. What other evidence is there that this will happen? Well, in a Westminster debate in June, a delegated legislative committee debate, the Secretary of State said the Department of Education and the Council for Curriculum, Examinations and Assessment have been developing an RSE progression framework that will be adapted and used in the guidance issued by the department. So the Secretary of State said all the way back in June that SIA's progression framework will form the basis of the new curriculum. And in the legislation's explanatory memorandum, it says the Department of Education has made some progress on the issue and has been working with the Council for the Curriculum Examinations and Assessment on a relationships and sexuality progression framework. SIA has undertaken significant stakeholder consultation on the framework, and we assess that the framework can be updated to reflect the CEDAW recommendations. Now, when they say it can be updated, what they mean is that abortion can be added to it. So the one thing missing from the RSE framework is materials on abortion. SIA are currently hiring a person to create those, and they're currently in contract at the moment. And once that is added, the framework will then become CEDAW compliant. So when you take what the Secretary of State has said, what the consultation has said, and what the explanatory memorandum has said, it very much looks like the progression framework will form the new curriculum come January 2024. Now, for everybody, that should cause you great concern. And we took a read through some of the topics that are covered under the progression frameworks for Key Stage 3. Many of these topics, in fact, pretty much all of these, are not covered by any opt-out at all. So pupils are not allowed to opt out of the lessons that are being talked about here. At Key Stage 3, years 8 to 10, and again, sorry, this is not an exhaustive list. This is kind of first rating what we spotted right away. There are other things, no doubt, in there that would make some parents really uncomfortable. But at Key Stage 3, it talks about developing an understanding of sexual identity and be able to describe the terms associated with sex, gender, and sexual orientation and give examples of that. Understand and respect the need for tolerance and acceptance towards various lifestyles. Understand the way individuals think of themselves or describe themselves to others in terms of their gender is unique to them and should be respected. Recognize bullying, including homophobic, biphobic, transphobic bullying, cyberbullying, etc., and their responsibilities, and develop coping strategies. As they move on into Key Stage 4, some of the content of Key Stage 4 talks about describing the concepts of sexual identity, gender identity, and sexual orientation, learning about diversity and sexual attraction, developing sexuality, the gender norms, gender equality, stereotype bias, and gender-based violence. Understand the ways that gender roles affect decisions about sexual behavior and contraceptive use. Analyze how gender equal roles can contribute to a healthier sexual relationship. So these are all areas that I think most parents would agree are particularly worrying. And if you go from the RSE Hub, you can also access some of the resources that they use to carry out these lessons. And I spent a bit of time looking at the LGBTQ plus matters section of the RSE Hub, looking at Unit 4, which is gender identities. And this is part of Activity 3 of that section of the website. It says that at this stage, explain the following to the class. So this is the teacher is being told to state these things to the class. Gender is your internal sense of being a girl, boy, both, or neither. This is different from your sex, which is understood to be linked to biological and genetic differences between males and females. Everyone is assigned a gender identity in birth that is based on their sex. Sometimes a person's genetically assigned sex does not correspond to their gender identity. And they might refer to themselves as transgender, non-binary, or gender non-conforming. There are many ways that people identify their gender. So the Secretary of State is trying to tell us this will be a scientifically accurate curriculum. But this is the garbage that is being produced and handed out to schools that is not based on science at all, and is in fact based on a pseudoscience that has developed over the last 30 to 40 years and is being presented to our children as facts rather than opinions. So we should be worried about this. But we are not totally clear on what the curriculum will look like yet. So what if those who are promoting the idea of RSE Lite turn out to be right? What if we get to January and the only things that come out in the guidance from the Department of Education are that schools must teach about abortion and contraception? What if schools are allowed to take those concept areas and develop them in whatever way they want, and teach them according to their own ethos? What will happen then? Well, the blueprint's already been laid out, because ultimately the opinion of the school, the opinion of the teacher, the opinion of our politicians here in Northern Ireland, the opinion of the Secretary of State even doesn't matter. It is the opinion of CEDAW is all that matters here. And we've already seen that they accurate education on sexual and reproductive health and rights to be a compulsory component of our curriculum for adolescents. And that goes way beyond abortion and contraception and includes many of the other resources that we've talked about tonight. So if we get a situation where we have RSE Lite being implemented in January, what will happen immediately is the Human Rights Commission will jump on it, because the Human Rights Commission are effectively just an activist organization. And already when the Secretary of State introduced his regulations, he talked about an opt-out for pupils. And back in August, the Human Rights Commission submitted a report to the CEDAW committee. And in that, they said the committee may wish to clarify whether, in its view, the provision for exemption in relationships and sexuality education within the regulations is compatible with its recommendations. Now, what could happen is that CEDAW could come back and say to the UK government, that is not compatible with our recommendations, and the opt-out will be removed immediately. CEDAW, if the Human Rights Commission go to CEDAW and say, is this curriculum that just teaches about abortion and allows school to tailor in whatever way they want, is that compatible with your recommendations? And CEDAW come back and say no, the Secretary of State will have to change it again, and match it up to exactly what CEDAW require. We got to remember how we got here in the first place, because this is so important. The CEDAW report puts that legal obligation through Section 9 on the Secretary of State to implement all of its recommendations. The CEDAW are giving their opinion on what should be done, and the Secretary of State has to do it. He can do it without a single vote in Northern Ireland. He can do it without a mandate in Northern Ireland. He can appoint himself to the highest positions in our assembly without anybody here ever voting for him. And he will continue to implement the regulations or the recommendations of CEDAW. And there is not a single thing that any politician in Northern Ireland can do about it. If Stormont was to come back tomorrow and we were to have 90 Christian MLAs sitting in Stormont, they could not do a single thing to change the RSE curriculum, to change our abortion laws, to repeal the law that was passed last year with regards to the exclusion zones at abortion clinics, because all of them are CEDAW recommendations, and the Secretary of State has full control over those issues. So there are lots of things that we can do. And our guest, who's coming from the States, will be talking to us about the lesser magistrates doctrine, how we as citizens and how people who find themselves in positions of authority can resist and should resist um, instructions that go against God's word and God's law. But in the meantime, while we wait for this to come, while we wait for that opportunity to take our stand as individuals, as parents, as teachers, as school staff, one of the big things that we need to be talking about to our politicians is that we want Section 9 to be their red line. Section 9 is the is the piece of legislation that gives the Secretary of State all the power over this issue. And as someone who lives and works and is raising a family in Northern Ireland, having one person in London with full control over our laws is not acceptable to me. And I would rather not have devolution than have a sham assembly that hasn't got the power to legislate on the things that matter most to me. And yes, I understand that the framework and that the protocol are important, but what is more important than the future of our children and the future of our country? What point is it getting rid of the protocol if we are going down the toilet anyway? Before Stormont returns, Section 9 must go. And that is a message that we must make clear to politicians across the board, both unionists and nationalists and those who don't designate as either. If they respect devolution, if they respect the concept of devolution, they simply will not take their seats in a Stormont executive or a Stormont assembly without Section 9 being gone. And we need to make it very clear to them that if they do, we lose all respect for all of them. So, Wesley, that's the last little piece that I have tonight on that. I appreciate that some people may have some questions on that. But if you have any questions, feel free to drop them to us by our WhatsApp, by our email address, which is info@niagainstrse.com. If you look up here, I'm trying to point in the right direction, directly up above my finger, there's a little QR code. If you scan the QR code with your phone, that will add you to our WhatsApp group, and you can get all the latest information from there. But I appreciate these 2 episodes have been content heavy. Some of it has been very educational and will make much more sense to teachers and school staff. And I appreciate that some people are coming at this from as a parent, but I think it's incredibly important as we look at a situation where some people especially are peddling this idea that this isn't bad. This is going to be just a minor tweak, and it's an opportunity rather than a threat. I think it's important from an educational perspective to understand just how serious the changes here are going to be, and how serious of an impact it will have on our schools, on our teachers, on our school staff, and most importantly on our children as time goes on.
Mark, thank you so for that very, very presentation tonight. And I think it really reiterates just how deadly this is. As you have said on previous nights, this is something has not been seen in 100 years of education in Northern Ireland, where we had a free, independent, relatively church-based, controlled religious system. They've been obliterated with these laws that have been passed through the CEDAW United Nations Committee coming here, and then our British Parliament adopting them to be implemented in full here in Northern Ireland. And as you have said, any self-respecting, not even devolutionist, respecting Democrat, if you believe in democracy, you cannot have this type of social engineering, colonialism being on the minds of tens and hundreds of thousands of young people in Ireland. So this is not only just an issue of, of for our young people. This basically is the end of democracy in Northern Ireland until these issues are resolved. And that's why we're saying very categorically, very clearly, you need to speak to all of your politicians, whoever you vote for, and even those that you don't vote for, and say, what are you doing to get rid of Section 9? This legislation be abolished. It must be consigned to the dustbin of history. We are not going to have a situation guinea pigs for social experiments, not like seen in anywhere in the Western world. There's no other democracy where this is happening, only here. And so to tie in with that, our friends will be highlighting really how this can be stopped, because that's effectively where we need to use how and what do we need to stop this. And we have two venues, two dates. The first Thursday, the 5th of October in the Portadown area. If you're interested in that event, get in touch and we'll send you the details. The events are not public just yet, but if you're interested, send us information or send us a request. We'll let you know where the venue is, and we encourage you to get as many people venue, and to especially people of influence, pastors, persons, people and people on boards of and like get them to that event. So that's Thursday the 5th. The second venue that we have now, which has just been confirmed today, 9th of October, that is going to be in the Greater Ballymena area, North Antrim. So that venue has been confirmed. So get in touch with us. We will let you know the locations, but those are the dates: the 7:30 at Portadown and 8 p.m. Further events will be scheduled if we get the interest. We want to see gathering in the material that's going to be presented is going to be the game changer in how we deal with this going forward. And this is in other parts where these things have been done. And so we'll be able to share that out with you. So I want to say thank you to Mark for really putting a lot of work in bringing a lot to this issue, because it has been very confusing. There's been a lot of different theories about what is going to be taught, what's not going to be taught. It's very clear this is a social engineering program for our young people. It will be devastating if this continues and is allowed to happen. Our society cannot. Our society is faced for big collapse. And I think, Mark, what we need to do in future nights is to look at the frameworks and then to start to link that into the content that will ultimately be in classrooms. I think that's where we need to take the discussions now in the next few weeks, is looking at the guide, the potential guidance, how that's interpreted, and then what is that when we get to the classrooms. Because materials, they're just materials out of the social engineering universities. This is just highly theoretical. This is completely anti-Christian, completely anti-God. Anyone who adopts these these beliefs is it's of our Christian civilization. This have to be very clear at what we're facing here, and so it is a satanic. Ultimately, it's a satanic onslaught, but we know who wins, and it's our time. So, Mark, do you want to say something there?
Yeah, just having a look at a couple of questions there. So, a couple of people are asking about Portadown and details for Portadown. I think you said there was going to be a meeting in Portadown, did you?
Yeah, there's going to be a meeting in Portadown. We will post that on our WhatsApp group. So if you're on the WhatsApp group, you'll get the details. Okay, they'll be coming out in the next few days once we get the advertising just prepared for that. If you're not on WhatsApp, send us an email or phone us or something. Just get in touch. Our details are on the website. We don't want to just put it out too public just yet, but we want to focus on who we're we're trying to get.
Another one here, a really good question from Catherine. She was asking, do these changes pave the way for changes to primary school RSE? It would there be another consultation before it is changed as well? So that's a really interesting question, and a lot of people initially were saying things like this is going to be taught in primary schools, and we're sharing pretty extreme content. What's very clear is that these regulations only change Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4. Now, there's a very good reason for that, because the CEDAW report was based around the idea of abortion. So they were asked to come and make a report based on abortion, and it doesn't make sense, and it wouldn't make sense for the Secretary of State to implement an RSE curriculum that is supposed to be about abortion to primary schools. You promote abortion to those who are capable of having children of their own. So that's why he didn't do it. And if he had changed the RSE curriculum for primary schools, he would have been immediately taken to court on that. But it is a slow drip thing here. He is making a big change at the minute. If it's allowed to go through, it will no doubt have an impact moving forward. And we've already got some MLAs from the likes of the Alliance Party who are talking about more wide-ranging changes to RSE in Northern Ireland. So it's really important that we slam this door shut firmly, and we send a very clear message that we are not going to tolerate this stuff. Our primary schools, by and large, do a fantastic job of the way they handle relationship education. They don't have sexuality education in very many primary schools, apart from the kind of puberty talk. My son, who's in P3, came home the other day, and he had been doing a relationship class as part of the work that he had been doing in school, and he had a kind of little plate with an arrow on it that explained different feelings of being angry or being sad or being frustrated, and they were talking about how you can identify the way you feel and how you can manage that. And I have absolutely no problem with my child's primary school teacher talking to them about that, because that is a very important part of learning. If a child is angry or upset or feeling down, that can impact upon their learning. So it is important that they understand those feelings and how to manage them moving forward. So a really good question, Catherine, and definitely one that that will be more prevalent in the future. And we've got one there where the Alliance Party proposing. So if you go and have a look at around about the same time that the Secretary of State announced these regulations, Connie Egan, who is one of their newer MLAs, released a statement talking about how we need to have a set curriculum for all schools, regardless of ethos, that deals with a very set range of ideas laid down by liberal people like her. So if you want to do that, there is a press release on the Alliance Party website. Just search for Connie Egan RSE on Google, and you'll get access to that and be able to see what the Alliance Party are up to.
Yeah, I mean, just to follow on from that, just 2 points, Mark. I read an interesting article by an organization in Wales which is involved in RSE awareness teach issues, and the article was as how can primary schools adopt Pride Day into their into their school curriculum. I think it's very important to realize that they are pushing hard for this material to be brought to a very even younger and younger audience, and it's so, as Mark has said, this we have stopped, and we have a very short period of time. I feel the next 6 months are going to be critical in this battle, And ultimately, the big thing that's going to change this is the repeal of Section 9. If we have politically right across the board politicians saying we're not doing it, we're not having it, Section 9 will have to go, or there'll be no more government in Northern Ireland. There will be absolutely no more engaging in the democratic structures until the British government removes this. Then I think we can move, this can be solved, very, very quickly. But if we start getting focused on other areas, and we want to see this thing completely and utterly completely. The second point I wanted to make was on relation to the Alliance Party. Our members or friends was at a meeting where the Alliance Party leader was at a youth event. She was asked a very, very direct question. When should children be able to transition from one sex to another, or one gender to another? And her answer, after a few diversions, when she was pinned down, she said, I believe from the age of 8, children should be able to start that process. So I think that clear indications of the type of politics we have in Northern Ireland and the type of direction that they're taking things. And it's utterly outrageous. And we are praying for a spiritual transformation. Ultimately, as a Christian organization, we want to see God turn the situation around. We're praying. I want to really encourage you, if you're in church, talk to your pastor, your clergyman, and your minister, and get this issue in your prayer meetings. And we also have a video resource which we can offer out to churches, which will outline what's happening. So that's available for you. So just let us know if you want that. Furthermore, if you feel you would like an event, just get in touch with us and we will see what we can do. But really want to emphasize the 2 main events. That 5th of October, Thursday, Portadown area, Monday the 9th of October, Ballymena area. And we're going to be outlining the strategy. So really pray into that, those meetings very, very much. Mark, have you any final comments just before we go?
No, I'm going to bed.
Okay, I'm sure. I know you haven't been feeling so good this last few days, and thank you so much for everything. We'll be back next Tuesday at 8:30 with a further update. We'll be delving further into this, and we really want you to get behind the campaign against RSE and get involved. Join the WhatsApp groups and encourage others, and share this video out to as many as your friends and contacts. So God bless you all. Take care. Good night.